conservatives chart their course, Marine Le Pen's path to power, and Japan's most unlikely TV star. Puerto Rico just became the largest government entity in U.S. history to seek a form of bankruptcy protection. The request from Puerto Rico's governor sets up a showdown between the island and the Wall Street firms it owes money to. Puerto Rico and its agencies owe more than $70 billion, racked up during a decade of recession. The family of Alton Sterling wants the state of Louisiana to pursue criminal charges against 2 police officers who shot and killed the Baton Rouge man last year, because the Justice Department is not.
Open up your heart, your eyes, and give us the justice that we deserve.
Despite multiple videos of the 2016 shooting, federal investigators said they don't have enough evidence to prosecute.
We cannot establish that Mr. Sterling was not reaching for a gun, or more accurately, that the officers did not believe he was reaching for a gun.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson indicated a major policy change in a speech today to his staff. He said the U.S. will now be willing to work with other countries even if they don't meet American standards on human rights.
In some circumstances, if you condition our national security efforts on someone adopting our values, we probably can't achieve our national security goals or our national security interest.
British Prime Minister Theresa May accused European Brexit opponents of intentionally distorting her government's approach to negotiations to punish her at the polls in the upcoming snap election.
All of these acts have been deliberately timed to affect the result of the general election that will take place on the 8th of June.
Several British politicians responded, saying May made the accusations for political gain. Protests in Venezuela's capital again turned violent as police launched tear gas at protesters who built roadblocks and called for new elections. Nearby, President Nicolas Maduro signed a decree to bypass the opposition-controlled assembly and rewrite the Constitution. In response, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators introduced a bill targeting Venezuelan officials with sanctions. Disappointing some senators, FBI Director James Comey said he wouldn't give updates on the Bureau's investigation into Russian election interference until agents had completed their work. He also said he had no regrets about how he handled the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails.
It makes me mildly nauseous to think that we might have had some impact on the election, but honestly, it wouldn't change the decision.
Donald Trump met with Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, in Washington today. It's the latest American effort to restart meaningful peace negotiations.
I've always heard that perhaps the toughest deal to make is the deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Let's see if we can prove them wrong, okay? Good.
While both presidents want to see peace in the future, the key question now is how much influence Abbas has at home. Phoebe Greenwood has more.
Mahmoud Abbas has many titles. As chairman of the PLO, he represents Palestine on the international stage, at least nominally. He was elected president of the Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank, in 2005. But as there's not been another election since then, that democratic legitimacy, strictly speaking, ran out 7 years ago. He's also head of the Fatah political movement. But he's facing a growing leadership threat from Marwan Barghouti, a charismatic figure currently leading thousands of Palestinian prisoners in a hunger strike from an Israeli prison. Abbas's claim to be Palestinian president is challenged by Hamas, a rival faction that controls the Gaza Strip. This week, the Hamas leadership unveiled a new manifesto, backtracking from its founding principle that rejected the existence of the State of Israel. Abbas might present this new, softer Hamas as the result of his influence. He has recently been exerting pressure on Hamas in Gaza, cutting salaries to government officials and refusing to pay Gaza's electricity bill to Israel, which means that 1.8 million people now face 24-hour power cuts. But the new Hamas manifesto is really the product of 4 years of complex negotiation and debate within that movement. In Palestine, Trump is widely considered to be the most pro-Israeli US president to date. Even if he does manage to negotiate the ultimate deal with Abbas, Would Abbas have the popularity or legitimacy to make it stick in Palestine?
At least two mainstream Republicans announced today that they'll back the GOP healthcare bill after all. The ball is back in the moderates' court after the hardliners got on board last week. For the past 2 years, the Freedom Caucus, the 36 most conservative members of the House, has banded together to buck their own party and reject any legislation that isn't deeply red. They'd been blocking the Obamacare replacement bill, but then they abruptly dropped most of their demands and agreed to accept it after House leaders added an amendment letting states opt out of certain coverage requirements. It's a jarring reversal for the Freedom Caucus. It's also their only way forward. Alexandra Jaffe reports.
The House Freedom Caucus has always stood out for standing on principle, until last week. That's when the most principled group in Washington succumbed to politics and got on board with the latest version of healthcare reform.
We think we made a bill much better. It's not full repeal, I'll be honest, it's not, but it is as good as we think we can get right now.
It's what their party leaders were pushing for, and it marked a compromise, one that left parts of Obamacare intact in hopes of getting moderates on board. That's how legislating in Washington typically works, but it's not how the Freedom Caucus typically works. It's actually completely contradictory to what two of the group's most prominent members told us about healthcare reform when we were home with them in their districts a couple of weeks ago. Jim Jordan and Mark Sanford represent very different districts, Jordan in mid-Ohio and Sanford the South Carolina coast, and don't have much in common. But they had similar complaints about the original Republican healthcare bill. Jordan said Freedom Caucus members opposed that bill on principle, and also because of the process.
We're doing what we told the voters we're going to do. Well, everyone knows this health care bill doesn't fully repeal Obamacare. And in the end, the test will be, do premiums actually come down?
Obamacare is still the law of the land, though, and if you don't figure out a way to compromise with moderates on your bill, it may be for the foreseeable future. I mean, isn't that a failure of the House Freedom Caucus?
We got time. The only thing worse than not getting it done is doing it wrong. And good process typically makes good policy, and good policy makes for good politics. And when you have a process where the bill was hidden away, rolled out, no actual hearings where you bring in witnesses, that's not how it's supposed to work.
So in late March, they joined together to stop the bill.
I've got to go, guys.
Do they have the votes right now?
They do not have the votes right now.
Are they going to delay the vote to get you guys on board?
I doubt it.
How are you? Doing all right?
Stunts like these have given the group a reputation for obstruction, which they embrace. That's basically how Sanford described it. The Freedom Caucus has had more success in blocking bills, though, than passing them. So how do you achieve that end goal if you don't get any of your own legislation passed?
One of the most important things that we can do in any legislative process is at times stop things. There is a bias, as we both know, toward, quote, doing something in the world of government. The question is, can we be more contemplative in that process so that what we do actually has a positive impact in people's lives and doesn't come with a whole host of unintended consequences?
Creating gridlock worked for the Freedom Caucus while Barack Obama was in office. But now, with full GOP control of Washington, they have a chance to pass GOP policies. And obstructing those policies is making them enemies within their party. The president even threatened to primary them. Sanford joked about that threat with a group of high schoolers.
It doesn't make your day when the President of the United States says, I'm going to take you out in the next primary. That's certainly not a good day. But as best I can tell, his attention span is relatively short, and so I'm hoping that maybe he'll forget about that and go on to something else.
But voters are getting fed up. They want politicians with integrity and action.
I'll start with healthcare.
Yeah.
Why did they seem to want to push this so fast on the healthcare issue?
Repeal and then replace. What guarantees competition back into the marketplace? it has been incredibly difficult for healthcare organizations to manage their own business because of the way politics and policy has been conducted in the last year.
100% of developed nations in the world
socialized
healthcare.
I understand. I'm going to come back to you, but all I'd say is...
And in fact, all the conservative parties, all the conservative parties in the UK, Canada, Australia, Japan,
I got
Israel,
it. Everybody's passionate about healthcare.
100% support
I got it.
You know
and
why?
I'm hearing about it. All I've heard about over the last week is healthcare. I got it.
That pressure is part of the reason they went back on all those declarations about public hearings and full Obamacare repeal and endorsed the latest bill. Compromising is a new thing for the Freedom Caucus. They don't know if it'll pay off. But back in D.C. this week, they seemed pretty comfortable with it, at least for now.
I'm willing to stand up and fight for exactly what I told you I was going to fight for, because I think it's the right thing to do. But when we get the best deal I think we can get, and it's moving the ball down the field in a constructive way, we're willing to support that with the idea that we have more work to do.
Sanford, though, acknowledged the group accepted a bill that was less than perfect, because they had to.
But when we talked, you said that there was a role for the Freedom Caucus and conservatives in general from preventing imperfect laws from being passed. It's a bad bill the same way the last one was, for a number of reasons, so why support it now?
I suspect in part there's a limited bandwidth to dealing with any one issue in the United States Congress. I mean, to be constructively engaged in the process of deliberation, at some point you got to find a way to either get to yes, or yes with 3/4, or yes with a half. And for me, I've made my peace saying, okay, this federalism model, though not perfect and though not a full repeal, is the best that we can get out of this Congress at this time, and I'm willing to go with it.
During the Republican presidential primary, white evangelical conservatives could have chosen one of their own. But they skipped all the familiar faces.
2 Corinthians 3:17, that's the whole ballgame.
Trump rewarded them by bringing on Mike Pence as his vice president, one of the most beloved figures in white evangelical politics. But what do white evangelical conservatives actually want Pence to do? We might find out this week.
Tomorrow's a National Day of Prayer, a political religious event that started in 1952 with an act of Congress and a signature from President Harry Truman. Presidents generally use this day to make broad appeals to the nation's vast religious community. But this White House has been kicking around an idea that will appeal to the specific evangelical conservatives that stood up for President Trump, an executive order protecting religious freedom. Tomorrow's National Day of Prayer could be a great way to release it. It would be a moment where Vice President Pence's influence could really shine. Pence has been a champion of white evangelical conservatism for his entire political career, and he's still doing it. He was the first vice president to ever show up at the March for Life when he appeared there earlier this year. The first time we heard about an executive order protecting religious freedom, back in February, there was a huge outcry from LGBT advocates. They feared an order that would make it easier for people to discriminate against them. They protested, the order didn't get signed. But this time might be different. We haven't seen language of an executive order yet, but evangelical groups know what they want. I spoke to Kim Colby, senior counsel at the Center for Law and Religious Freedom, about what her group wants to see from President Trump.
I think all of us thought that the initial executive orders about travel and other things just did not go through the process because he was in such a hurry to do certain things. I would hope that it's a good, tight executive order that's been vetted by many people inside the administration, not like the first few executive orders.
Evangelical Christians have felt a little bit under siege in the past few years.
Yes, things that we never thought could happen in a free country have happened to individuals.
Does it feel like now you have the power to push back on that?
The power shouldn't be used to hurt anyone, but the power should be used to create a space. And I think that's what I hope the executive order does, is make sure that religious freedom and free speech and all of our First Amendment rights, free press, are all really strong, so that regardless of who's in power, whether your views are popular or not, or in power or not, you're protected. And that's what we're aiming for.
session's extensive record of treating all Americans equally under the law is clear and well documented. Throughout his
I would describe it as a giggle. It was an involuntary reaction. I didn't go to that hearing planning to laugh and to get arrested for it. Just think of all that tax dollars spent on something so petty.
On Sunday, French voters will cast their ballots in an election widely seen as France's most important in decades. Tonight, they watch the two candidates go head-to-head in a final TV debate.
L'enfant chéri du système et des élites. Votre stratégie, c'est simplement de dire beaucoup de mensonges.
The French face a choice between centrist Emmanuel Macron, a free trader and former investment banker, and the far-right's Marine Le Pen, a Eurosceptic who wants to curb immigration. For Le Pen, it's the moment she's been working toward her entire life. Marine Le Pen was born into a far-right political dynasty, albeit one that's never actually held national power. In 1972, her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, co-founded Front National, a race-baiting party that spent its first decade in the political wilderness, often struggling to gather the 500 signatures required to even get on the French ballots. But it did motivate its opponents to violence. In 1976, the Le Pen family home was bombed. No one was injured, and no suspects were ever found. But for Marine, only 8 at the time, the event was the beginning of her political awakening. The family moved to the Montretout Mansion, a house on the outskirts of Paris, which became the headquarters of Front National.
Marine Le Pen, elle va voir défiler dans sa maison tout le banc et l'arrière-banc de l'extrême droite française. C'est la maison de toutes les ruptures, de toutes les brisures du camp Le Pen qui se déchire, qui s'aime, qui se rabiboche depuis maintenant plus de 40 ans.
When Marine Le Pen was in her teens, her mother Pierrette ran off to start a new life with a man who had been writing a biography about her husband, marking a dramatic shift for Marine. Marine wouldn't speak with her mother for more than 15 years, growing much closer to her father and to Front National. After studying law, she took up an official role in the party. In 2002, after a decade of campaigning fruitlessly at her father's side, there was a remarkable breakthrough. Jean-Marie Le Pen made it to the final runoff in the presidential election against scandal-plagued Jacques Chirac.
La satisfaction d'une vie, de la mienne, et aussi probablement de la sienne.
The shock of seeing Front National's electoral success brought millions of people to the streets in protest.
C'est aussi quelqu'un qui s'est lancé en politique aussi quelque part pour réhabiliter le nom de son père. Qu'elle s'est sentie quelque part le sentiment de devoir une mission, un devoir de réhabilitation du nom Le Pen, et ça va l'endurcir, ça va lui forger son caractère et ça va énormément la rapprocher de son père.
It was billed as a contest between the crook and the fascist, but in the end, French voters held their noses and elected Chirac. Her father's loss helped Marine Le Pen understand that the only way Front National would get to power was to change the image of the party.
Monsieur, ça c'est très bon pour la santé en plus.
Elle pense qu'aujourd'hui, il y a une frange de la population à qui il y a possibilité de s'adresser, et donc elle va rendre le parti plus acceptable, plus médiatiquement plus polissable, et aussi elle va chercher à le professionnaliser.
It was Florian Philippot, a young civil servant in the Interior Ministry, who executed Marine's plan to clean up Front National's image, toning down its rhetoric and widening its support. But it wasn't until Jean-Marie Le Pen, the party's toxic founder, stepped down in 2011 that Front National could finally move forward, with Marine as president.
Marine Le Pen est élue président du Front National.
Marine Le Pen, elle se prend un petit peu pour Jeanne d'Arc, c'est vrai. Elle se sent investie d'une mission supérieure, une mission qui la transcenderait, qui est celle du peuple de France. Et elle se sent investie d'un devoir, comme ça, d'une mission qui la dépasse, mais pour laquelle elle reste encore très, très tourmentée. Et elle a conscience des sacrifices que ça cause dans sa vie personnelle. Et je ne serais pas surpris, peut-être qu'un jour, Marine Le Pen décide de tout abandonner.
The weight of the Le Pen legacy may sink Marine this time, but she's already gained the political legitimacy the family has long sought. Japan has a bad reputation when it comes to accepting foreigners, and it's well earned. Only 1.3% of the population is foreign-born, and black people are especially rare. But now, one Nigerian-American is becoming ubiquitous there, because he's on Japanese TV every single day.
通販番組で紹介するのは大概健康グッズ健康グッズ健康グッズそしてこいつがタイガー・ウッズ
Ike Noel is a pretty recognizable face in Japan. He's a member of a popular comedy troupe and even appears in commercials. Ike originally came to Japan working for Goldman Sachs, but he quit to join up with a talent agency, and his celebrity exploded practically overnight. Part of his popularity is because of his ability to switch back and forth between Japanese and English whenever he needs.
あ、これで有名になったって瞬間。
有名になったっていうことじゃなくて、あ、ちょっとだけ注目されてるなっていう気持ちはまあ何回もあったことある。
じゃあ最初は？
最初はやっぱり。その東京ディズニーシーの入り口のアナウンスのものまね。
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Tokyo Disney Sea.
それがめちゃくちゃ盛り上がって、その次の日にツイッターにアップされたの。その動画が。その動画のリツイートが20万。
20万。
それで普通になんか電車とか乗ると、ああ東京ディズニーシーの人、東京ディズニーシーの人みたいな。どうもみたいな。東京ディズニーシーの人ですみたいな。どういうショックやん。
So you're a comedian, but you do kind of everything.
In Japan, once you're like, if you're a comedian, they just see you as an entertainer, so they expect that you can do anything. So I do narration jobs, I do voice jobs. I do my main job, comedy, even music.
Sorry
about that, you gotta take your shoes off.
Yeah, no, it's all good. You pretty much do your own hair, though.
Yeah, I do my own hair. It's kind of, they don't know how to do black hair.
Well, this is like every day for you, though, right?
Yeah, this is every day.
Dang, man.
Monday through Friday. With funky clothing.
All right. Since last year, Ike's been one of the main hosts of a show called Ohasta. That means that while a lot of adults recognize him as a sketch comic, to their kids, he's more like Steve on Blue's Clues.
Oha!
This isn't just any kid show.
No,
either.
this is like the Japanese version of Sesame Street. It's the most famous children's TV show in Japan.
But just because Ike's famous doesn't mean he doesn't have to deal with prejudice. Japan's one of the most ethnically homogenous countries in the world, and it doesn't have the best reputation for diversity.
What's it like being a black dude living in Japan?
I'm pretty sure you experienced the whole train thing where you sit down and then, like, there's open seats next to you, but people don't sit down.
That's happened.
Yeah. I don't think Japanese people are racist. I think they just don't know. Okay. Let's do this.
Yeah, gambare.
Ike's a comedian, so you might think that being on Ohasta is just a distraction from his career goals. But Ike says a kid's TV show is an important place for him to be.
I think me being on the children's show every day is huge.
Why's that?
The children now who are going to be growing up to be adults, they already have the image of different people, like, you know.
Little kids seeing you on TV, and it's, oh, this is just he's another guy.
Yeah, he's a normal guy. Whereas, 15 years, before, I think it's just like, oh, black guy. But we've seen a lot of white people, but like, whoa, black guy, He's like, what, Pokemon or something? I don't know. He's a rare Pokemon,
That's Vice News Tonight for Wednesday, May 3rd.